Ash Wednesday number 5 takes us into some of the most troubling and challenging elements of not only the time that Eliot lived in, but could also be, as we shuttle forward to our time, is what is the relationship between the speech of God, the word, capital W, and the small word that prophets would speak. Eliot lived at a period of time, and this was published 1930, when culture wars were very much front stage. The political right and the left was intensely polarized, going at one another. The Nazis were about to emerge in Germany. England was pulled in different directions politically. The culture wars of their time were dividing people. And the big question, where is God in all of this? And who speaks for God? Because there's many false prophets often that will emerge and claim to speak for God in the midst of a historic context where there is division, people are paralyzed. Some forms of Christianity will identify with the right, some the center, some the left, and then they equate where they land with God's speech for the nation. And so Eliot in Ash Wednesday number 5 is very much grappling with the question of the word logos and then the small word, so the direct speech of God, logos, and then those who speak for God, small word. And then how do thoughtful people discern the meaningful speech of God in the midst of their historic moment? And in that sense, section 5 of Ash Wednesday has a perennial relevance to it, because as much as his time, in ours, there's culture wars, there's polarizations, there are people claim to speak for God on the right, the left, the center. And thoughtful people, their big question is, who can one trust? People claim to speak for God. The question is, how do we know you speak for God? And who can we trust in situations like that? One tendency is then to say, I trust no one. And so you essentially are in the position of just God is absent, essentially, from time and history, living in a transcendent realm. But if you start from the position that somehow God is immanent and somehow engages in time and history in a meaningful manner, then who is one to trust with the word? So let me start with number 5 then. If the lost word, small w, if the lost word is lost, so we can't find people speaking that word. I mean, there are many people speaking the word that claims to be for God, but is it? The word seems to be lost. If the spent word, small w, is spent, if it's been used all up, if the unheard, unspoken, capital word, so the logos in that sense, is unspoken and unheard, so we're in a situation here in which both people who claim to speak for God, small w, and the word itself, the logos, is unheard, it's unspoken, it's spent, it's lost. Still, he says, is the unspoken small word, the capital W word, unheard, the word without a word, the word within the world and for the world. Yet in a sense, Eliot is saying that word is present. But why is it that people are not hearing it properly? There are people claiming to speak the word, and yet what they're hearing is not the true small w word, so false prophets, and the big W word is not properly being heard. The world and for the world, and the light shines in darkness. So he's obviously using word here in Logos from John, and here you again, the light shines in darkness. So the word from John 1 to 5, just as in John 1 and 1, he's drawing from this. The light shines in darkness, and against the word, the unstilled world, still world. So why is the world, both religious and non-religious, not hearing the capital W word or prophet's small w word, her speaking? Is because it's an unstilled world and it's whirling, it's ever moving, but it has not found the center in which meaningful hearing can take place. And so against the word, the unstilled world, it's in chaos. People are being pulled in different directions. They don't know who to trust, and it's whirling about. It's about the center of the silent word. So the word is silent. The big capital word is silent, and people don't know how to hear anymore. So section 1 deals very, very much with the question of capital W word, the Logos, which is eminent, and then small w, which is people speaking the divine word, and yet who do you trust in something like this anymore? And then he draws from Micah 6-3, O my people, what have I done unto you? And in Micah, what you have a case is God has said, listen, I have led you people out of Egypt. I have given you all these things. Why have you turned against me in that sense? And so it's almost as if Eliot here is drawing back, he's linking John to Micah and basically saying, why this deafness? Why this excessive busyness? Why this inability here? What have I done that you can't hear me anymore? Why are you deaf? Why wax in the ears of the soul? Where shall the word be found, he goes on to say. Where will the word resound? So he's asking this question as he builds on Micah almost in an accelerated way. Not here. There's not enough silence. So you can see Eliot constantly turning back to the contemplative, the meditative, the ability to listen to the capital W word or the small w, but that only can be done in silence and stillness and an attentive pose and posture. You can't hear it on the sea or on the islands, not on the mainland, in the desert or the rainland. For those who walk in darkness. Now he's drawing from Isaiah here, Isaiah 9:2. So he's looking at his time, which is in darkness. And then how does the light get through in a situation like this? Both in the daytime and in the nighttime, the right time and the right place, and not here. There's no place of grace for those who avoid the face. So how does grace penetrate? How does grace articulate the true vision of eternity for those who don't want to hear? For those who are preoccupied with other commitments, and they can be religious or non-religious, they can be engaged in religious chess games and wrestling to and fro with ideas and all sorts of political activism, but they in fact are missing. They're too busy to actually see the face because they don't know their own face yet and they don't hear properly. No time to rejoice for those who walk among noise and deny the voice. So in fact, it is noise and it is busyness that prevents people from hearing the eternal voice in that sense. So here's very much a spiritual discipline that Eliot is articulating in section number 5 of Ash Wednesday, in which silence, slowing down, solitude, stillness, facing our own interior drivenness that actually prevents us hearing the word. So will the veiled sister, so we're back to the silent sister, she's veiled. We can't see her because we don't know how to see ourselves in that sense. Will the veiled sister pray for those who walk in darkness, who choose thee and oppose thee? So here's this tension, very much at work. The first level he's dealing with here are those who are so wrapped in secularism, so opposed to the sacred, so seeing religion in a negative way, so seeing its destructive way, that in fact the light can't even penetrate the cave of their own soul. They're so deep inside the cave. The second group of people on the journey are trying to get out of the cave, out of the shadows. They're trying to oppose the shadow boxing between different ideological, political, religious groups. And then the veiled sister sees them at the edge of the cave, between leaving the cave and potentially moving under the blue canopy, under the day star, into a fresher, fuller way. But they're also torn like Prince Hamlet. Earlier poem of Eliot's, Prufrock, he very much highlights Prince Hamlet. When I finished my BA honors in philosophy and literature, I did my graduating essay on Hamlet as very much a figure who on the one hand knows what he must do, direction he must take, and yet in his doubting, his cynicism, his skepticism, he always pulled back. So he's a torn person between the ideal that he wants to live and yet for various reasons not acting on that. So he becomes paralyzed and impotent. And this is the second sort of person that Eliot's addressing. The sensitive, reflective, intellectual types who long to believe in something, but they bring in all sorts of reasons for not believing. So will the veiled sister pray for those who walk in darkness, who choose thee and oppose thee? So there's both the desire to choose, and on the other hand, the spirit pulls back to oppose. Those who are torn on the horn between season and season. between, on the one hand, wanting to move in the spring season and yet still living in the winter of their soul, between time and time, between hour and hour, word and word, power and power, those who wait in darkness. And so these are the type that Eliot is very much, who understands himself because he was a part of that generation, who on the one hand had dismissed religion, who saw it as problematic, saw it as distorting reality, and yet that didn't mean the longing for something deeper, more meaningful would go away. And so those who wait in the darkness, will the veiled sister pray for children at the gate? So these are at the gate between leaving the cave and entering into the bigger, the fuller world, where in fact the eagle flies, because this number 5 is the book of John, really, in this way, calling people away, in fact, where they can hear the capital W word, the small word as well. So the veiled sister, will she pray for children at the gate who will not go away but cannot pray? So people, because of tragedy, suffering, disappointment, betrayal, all these things that can hurt and harm and shrivel the soul, that can make people hesitant about turning to religion, to Christianity, to Christ again. They won't go away, but they can't pray. They long to believe, but they can't believe because of empirical, difficult circumstances they've lived with. Will she pray for those who choose and oppose? And then he comes back to the quote from Micah again. "O my people, what have I done unto you that you are in this place and journey, either totally opposing me or hesitant about believing in me because of what's happened to you on your journey?" And so, "O my people, what have I done?" Or one might say, what have those who claim to be people of God done to you that has brought you in this particular place, that you long to grow deeper, long to get out of the cave, but are hesitant? So will the veiled sister between the slender yew trees, and the yew trees again are the signs of death or resurrection, and depending what a person listens to, they can slip deeper and ever deeper into a sort of soul death, or move towards resurrection, the evergreening element in the soul. We can see, as I mentioned earlier, Eliot is very much the soul whisperer, like a horse whisperer. He's trying to call people to the third level of the journey, not a form of secularism, anti-religion, but a form of people who are increasingly open. They sense a calling, but because of painful experiences, they fear moving on to the next step of the journey. And so it's the veiled sister is there for them. So will the veiled sister between the slender yew trees pray for those who offend her? Because she's trying to call them away from their fears, their insecurity, their internal reaction, their paralysis, their doubts. But they get stuck because of the past hurts and pains, and she's trying to call them actually further down the trail where in fact their wings will be fully spread once again in a much deeper and fuller understanding of the faith journey. And in that sense, they offend her because she wants to lead them much, much further in terms of who they actually could be if they can get over those painful hurts that in fact have paralyzed them in their journey. And so are terrified and cannot surrender, and affirm before the world, on the one hand, their interest in spirituality, their desire to make sense of it, and yet they deny between the rocks as they hit these difficult issues. It's like Odysseus in the Odyssey trying to steer between Scylla and Charybdis. These painful experiences of the rocks in life that make it very, very difficult to navigate anymore. In the last desert between the last blue rocks. So they're still in the desert of their soul, but there are the blue rocks. Blue rocks are the symbol of eternity. So they're torn between the desert of where they are, but they have the lure, the evocative nature, the draw of the blue rocks. The desert is in the garden. So in the midst of the desert, there's the garden, and the garden is in the desert of drought, spitting from the mouth the withered apple seed. And of course, the withered apple seed is all those hurts and pains and struggles and difficult experiences that the ego clings to and will not let go of, and becomes the means of resistance to actually growing and moving further. And you have to spit that seed out of the mouth. And it is that point that, in fact, the true seed of eternity will take root in the soil of the soul. And then he ends with this, "O my people," and he leaves it at that without saying, "What have I done to you?" So we are called to answer O my people, how will we respond to that in a positive way? Spit the apple seed out and then move on? Or will we get stuck like Hamlet, being pulled to and fro and not being able to leave the cave of shadows?